Hello students, I'm Himani Sharma, your UGC NET educator. In this new YouTube video, we are going to move forward with what we were doing, the paper-II English literature associated with the Indian poets. So today we are going to move forward with a female poet who is there. Her name is Sarojini Naidu. So of course you would have heard of her name when we call her or when you hear the word Bharatiya Kokila, right? She was known as the Nightingale of India, right? So here we have her portrait, and of course in Hindi we know and we call it as Bharatiya Kokila. Correct? So she was given these very titles, this one in Hindi and of course that one in English. So she was born in the year 1879 in Hyderabad and she passed away in the year 1949 after 2 years of independence in Lucknow. And her full name, if we talk about, is Sarojini Chattopadhyay. Correct? The first Indian woman to be the president of Indian National Congress and to be appointed as an Indian state governor of Uttar Pradesh. So she was a person who was appointed with this very thing, and other factual information that I have here is that she was also associated with Women of India's Association, Women's Indian Association, where she used to talk about the welfare of women. Correct? So she was associated with this very group or this very association per se. Correct? So this is what we had here for as the factual information. Bharatiya Kokila, known as the Nightingale of India, was the state governor of UP and the first Indian woman to be the president of the Indian National Congress. So we have certain works of hers which we all are supposed to see because she was a poet who was writing amalgamation of different themes and poetry, right? Poetry collections were there. So number one we have is The Golden Threshold, published in the year 1905, was her debut poetry collection, which means that this was her first work of poetry. Debut means first work, right? Was published under when she was just 26 years old. So she was writing when she was 26 years old and she got her work published, which was titled as The Golden Threshold. Right? The collection reflects her early poetry, that what were the stages that she was going through basically, right? The growth that we see in an artist can be seen in the works of his or her. So same is the case with her. So in early poetry, we see certain, somewhere or the other, there was lack of growth, but there were elements of romanticism and Indian sensibilities. So here again, the romanticism, if we are talking about, is not the romantic sense that we talk about with the context or in the context of couples. The romanticism that we are going to talk about here is about the love of nature. So she talks about the themes which are related to nature and Indian sensibilities. She talks about certain one way or the other about India's pitiful condition as well. So Indian sensibilities, Indian emotions, etc. All these things are evoked if a reader reads her piece of poetry. It includes poems. So this very collection, because of course it's a collection, it includes poem on love, nature, struggles of Indian society under the British colonial rule. Hence, we are talking about the Indian sensibilities per se, right? So, this very particular collection, this can be asked in the NET examination. It is further divided into 3 sections, which are titled as folk songs, under which there are certain poetry collections, the certain poems which are there. Songs for music, again, under which we have certain poems, and then we have poems under which there are other works of hers which are in the genre of poetry only. So all these with 3 collections that we are talking about here, these subsections in The Golden Threshold, all are comprising of poetry, but they are titled differently, correct? So this is what we are talking about in here. Then we have the other work of hers that is known as The Bird, or that is titled as The Bird of Time. 1912 is the one thing in which this work of hers was published, and in 1912 what happened? 1912, Rabindranath Tagore, he received the Nobel Prize. He wrote Gitanjali in 1912 and he got the Nobel Prize for that very thing, Nobel Prize in Literature. Her second poetry collection showcasing her maturing poetic voice. I already told you that the Golden Threshold talks about the poetry at an early stage when she was not really developed as a poet. There are certain things, of course, we also lack when we learn certain things at a stage when we are a child, 1, 2, 3, 4, or let's just say A, B, C, D. When we start making words, first of all, our words are not that much mature. We are just talking about normal things like cat, bat, rat. But when we grow, certainly there is an improvisation in the vocabulary of ours. So that is what is maturity. That is also seen in the works of a poet, in the works of a novelist, in the works of a dramatist, so on and so forth. So same was the case with her as well. The collection again deals with love, longing, nature and spirituality. So she also talks about spirituality. Love was also a theme which was prominent in the previous collection about which we talked about, the Golden Threshold. Nature was also a theme which we have seen in that very work. Includes the famous poem Palanquin Bearers. Palanquin are palkiyan, जो palkiyan उठाने वाले हैं उनके बारे में that poetry is there. A poignant and evocative piece that captures the emotions of a bride's farewell, because at that point of time डोली उठा के लेके जाते थे, right? The palki used to be there. So palanquin bearers, the people who are carrying that very palki, correct? So we are going to read the palanquin bearers here. Lightly, oh lightly, we bear her along, her the bride. She sways like a flower in the wind of our song. She skims like a bird on the foam of a stream. She floats like a laugh from the lips of a dream. Gaily, oh gaily, we glide and we sing, because we are, the bride is there in the doli. We bear her along like a pearl on a string, because the pearl on a string also is the one which, glides like this. Softly, oh softly, we bear her along. She hangs like a star in the dew of her song. She springs like a beam on the brow of a tide. She falls like a tear from the eyes of a bride. Lightly, oh lightly, we bear and we glide and we sing. We bear her along like a pearl on a string. So we see that this poetry is having some kind of imagery that if we are reading it as a reader, we can see that yes, the imagery, the images that she has used in this very thing, like a pearl on a string, like a tear in a bride's eyes, right? These very things are really evocative in nature when a person is reading a poem, and a reader can imagine these very things, because of course, and if we are reading a piece of poetry which is somewhere or the other relatable to us, to the Indian sensibilities, we can get related to it much more at a much more level. So we can see that yes, even if we are seeing, even if this is the happiness, like this thing, a tear from the eyes of a bride is something which is evocative of the feelings of the bride who is sitting in the palki, correct? So this is that very piece of poetry which is titled as Palanquin Bearers, and this title has been asked in the NET examination. Next we have The Broken Wing, which was published in the year 1917, published during a crucial period of India's freedom struggle, correct? Because it certainly began, right? This collection reflects her political awareness, and she was also that very person, as we already talked about, that she became a member, she became a president of Indian National Congress, and of course she had somewhere or the other, because of the involvement here, she had certain things related to the political career. So she was having a political career ahead of her, and of course along with that she was getting to write poetry, correct? Awareness and her involvement in the Indian independence movement, which is really there. It contains poems that celebrate the courage, the resilience and the sacrifice of the Indian freedom fighters who have given their lives or sacrificed their lives for their mother, right? The mother India that we already talk about. Then we have The Feather of the Dawn, published in the year 1928, a collection of poetry again that combines her love for nature, spiritual exploration, and the role of women in society. So already told you that she was associated with Women's India Association. So she was fighting against, right, the patriarchal norms which were set up for women, and she was fighting for the women and their role. So that can be seen in her poetry as well. Addresses the themes of femininity, motherhood, and the empowerment of women, that how women, even if they are getting involved in other stages of their lives, they still are working forward, they still are moving forward. The collection also includes poems inspired by Indian mythology and the cultural heritage, because we as Indians should not be forgetting that, and she was also the person who was keeping this very thing in mind and writing poetry about women, writing poetry about love, nature, longing, and especially including the Indian myths, Indian mythology and the cultural heritage, which should not be long lost. Correct? So another piece of poetry that we are going to read of hers is The Bengal Sellers, which has also been asked in the NET examination. So let me just first of all increase the size of this very poem a little bit for you all, and then we're going to read it. Bengal sellers are we who bear our shining loads to the temple fair. Who will buy these delicate, bright, rainbow-tinted circles of light? Because at that point of time, कांच की चूड़ियां बनती थी, आज भी होती है, but of course people prefer metal bangles, right? Lustrous tokens of radiant lives for happy daughters and for happy wives. Some are meet for a maiden's wrist, silver and blue as the mountain mist. Some are flushed like the buds that dream on the tranquil brow of a woodland stream. Some are aglow with the bloom that cleaves to the limpid glory of newborn leaves. Some are like fields of a sunlit corn, right? Meet for a bride on her bridal morning. Some like the flame of her marriage fire, or rich with the hue of her heart's desire, tinkling, luminous, tender and clear, like her bridal laughter and bridal tear. So she is again talking about the bangle sellers. Are this piece of poetry is narrated by the Bengal sellers, that we have seen happy wives and happy daughters. For these bangles are for a bride who is newly wed, who is having that very passion of her new marriage in her because of her heart's desire, etc. Some are purple and gold flecked grey, for she who has journeyed her life through midway. Some are for the women who have grown old. Correct? For she who has journeyed through life midway, whose hands have cherished, whose love has blessed, and cradled fair sons on her faithful breast. So she here is talking about whom? The old women, basically the grandmothers, etc. Because sons on her faithful breast. So you are carrying a baby and patting on his or her back, and serves her household in fruitful pride, and worships the God as her husband at her husband's side. So this is the poetry. This is a poem titled as The Bengal Sellers, narrated through the perspective narrated by a Bengal seller. So we talk about here, so 3 or 4 stages of a woman, from a daughter right to a bride to an old woman, have been shown. So what is the conclusion of this very particular poet, that is Sarojini Naidu? What were the particular themes? She has had a passion for India. Hence, she was involved politically in her career. She was also the person who was fighting for women's rights somewhere or the other. Love for nature, spirituality, advocacy for women's rights can be seen in her pieces of poetry. And we see that even if her themes are really simple, her poetry is really simple in nature, but it is really evocative. You build somewhere or the other a connection with the piece of poetry written by Sarojini Naidu when you read it. Her lyrical verses continue to resonate with readers, reminding them of the power of words, even if they are simple in nature, to evoke emotions, inspire change, that yes, we need to inspire certain kind of change, we need to change certain ways of the life and celebrate the beauty of life. Correct? So this is what we had about Sarojini Naidu, the Kokil, Bharat Kokila, or the Nightingale of India. And these were certain poetry collections and pieces of poetry which we all were supposed to read. Thank you so much and have a good day, until and unless I bring forward certain other videos related to the concept series of a paper 2. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.